The perfect wedding day I'd dreamed about since childhood shattered the moment my new mother-in-law stood up during the reception, champagne glass in hand, and announced she was taking our house. I'm Summer, and until that moment, I'd been floating on cloud nine. The ceremony had been beautiful, Colby had been perfect, and even the weather had cooperated. But Vanessa, my mother-in-law, had other plans. As per Davidson family tradition, she declared, her voice carrying across the stunned reception hall, the ancestral estate passes to the matriarch upon the marriage of the eldest son. I felt Colby's hand tighten around mine as whispers rippled through the crowd. My mother, Remy, was already half rising from her seat, but I squeezed Colby's hand and stood up myself. Vanessa, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, this is hardly the time or place for— Oh, but it is, dear, she smiled, pulling a yellow document from her designer purse. The perfect time to ensure everything is properly arranged. You wouldn't want to start your marriage with any misunderstandings, would you? My brother Ben appeared at my elbow. Let me see that document, he said, reaching for the paper. As a lawyer himself, he knew exactly what to look for. All in good time, Vanessa purred, tucking it away. For now, let's celebrate, to the happy couple, and to new beginnings. The reception continued, but the joy had been sucked out of the room. My best friend Felicity kept shooting concerned glances my way, while Colby seemed lost in thought, barely meeting my eyes. Don't let her ruin this day, my mother whispered, hugging me tight. We'll figure this out. But as I watched Vanessa work the room, sharing conspiratorial smiles with other family members, I knew this was more than just a power play. The house had been Colby's inheritance from his father, our dream home and future. We'd already moved in most of our things. What do you make of this? I asked Colby when we finally had a moment alone. He ran a hand through his hair, looking troubled. I've never heard of this tradition, but Mom wouldn't make this up, would she? The uncertainty in his voice made my stomach clench. I'd spent the last 2 years dealing with Vanessa's subtle manipulations and passive-aggressive comments. But this was different. This was war. As we cut the cake and posed for photos, I kept my smile firmly in place, but inside, I was already planning my next move. If Vanessa wanted to play games with my future, she'd learn exactly who she was dealing with. The document in her purse held answers, and I intended to find them, one way or another. 3 days after the wedding, I sat in Ben's office, watching him examine the photocopy of Vanessa's document I'd managed to sneak during the reception cleanup. This is interesting, Ben muttered, adjusting his reading glasses. The language is deliberately archaic, but something's off. What do you mean? I leaned forward, still wearing my work clothes from the real estate office where I'd barely managed to focus all day. Look at this watermark. He pointed to a faint pattern. This paper's not nearly as old as it's trying to appear. Maybe 20 years at most. A knock at the door interrupted us. Felicity burst in, waving her phone. You need to see this. Vanessa's already posted on Facebook about reclaiming her rightful family property. She's moving fast, I said, clenching my fists. Did Colby see it? He's not responding to my texts, Felicity replied, giving me a sympathetic look. Ben suddenly straightened up. Wait a minute. Summer, didn't you say Colby's father left you some papers to look through after the wedding? Yes. They're in that old study desk he insisted we keep. I haven't had a chance to— Go. Now. Ben's voice was urgent. Something about this document feels manufactured. Check those papers. I drove home, my heart racing. The house, our house, felt different now, knowing Vanessa wanted to take it. Inside the study, I pulled open the heavy desk drawer. Stacks of papers filled every inch. My phone buzzed. Colby. At Mom's. Need to sort some things out. Don't wait up. Anger and hurt fueled my determination as I dug through the papers. Near the bottom, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it, in my late father-in-law's handwriting. Dear Summer, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're married to my son. There's something you need to know about Vanessa and the estate. My hands shook as I read further. The doorbell rang, making me jump. Summer? It was Remy, my mother. Felicity called me. You shouldn't be dealing with this alone. I let her in, clutching the letter. Mom, look at this. Robert, Colby's dad, he knew. He knew Vanessa would try something like this. Remy read the letter, her expression darkening. That manipulative... She's done this before, hasn't she? To Robert's first wife? According to this, yes, but he left proof, evidence that could destroy her claim completely. I grabbed my keys. We need to get to the bank. Now. What's at the bank? A safety deposit box. Robert left the key in the envelope. Whatever's inside, Vanessa doesn't want us to find it. As we rushed to my car, another text from Colby appeared. Mom says she has proof of the tradition going back generations. Maybe we should consider her offer. I didn't reply. Let Vanessa play her games. I had a different tradition to uphold. My mother taught me never to back down from a bully. The safety deposit box contained exactly what we needed, and something I never expected. Johnny, our lawyer, spread the contents across his conference room table, while Felicity, Ben, and my mother watched. These bank statements are damning, Johnny said, holding up several papers. Vanessa systematically drained Robert's accounts in the months before his death. But she didn't know about this account, I added, pointing to another statement, the one he set up in trust for Colby. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Colby. I ignored it. There's more, Felicity said, examining old photographs. Look at these. Vanessa with Robert's first wife. They're smiling, but... She pulled the same stunt, Ben finished. Claimed family tradition. Forced them out of their home. Johnny cleared his throat. The difference is, this time we have proof. Robert documented everything. Smart man. The conference room door burst open. Colby stood there, face flushed. So this is where you've been? Conspiring against my mother? Conspiring? I stood up, hands shaking. Your mother is trying to steal our home. She says it's tradition. Why can't you just respect that? He moved closer, seeing the documents. What are these? Evidence, I said flatly. Your father left them for me. Want to see how your mother forced your father's first wife out of her home? Or how about these bank statements? Colby's face paled as he looked at the papers. Then his expression hardened. You went through Dad's private papers? He left them for me, I emphasized. Read the letter, Colby. I can't believe you're doing this. He backed away. Mom was right about you. You're just after the money, aren't you? The room fell silent. My mother stepped forward, but I held up my hand. Your mother is manipulating you, I said quietly. Just like she manipulated your father. Just like she's trying to manipulate me. I'm calling Mom, Colby declared, pulling out his phone. She needs to know what you're doing. Go ahead, Johnny interrupted, but first, you should know we're filing an injunction tomorrow morning. These documents prove fraud. Colby looked between us, confusion and anger warring on his face. Without another word, he stormed out. Felicity wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You okay? No, I admitted. But I will be. Johnny, file everything first thing tomorrow. Ben, help him prepare the case. What are you going to do? My mother asked softly. I picked up Robert's letter, my hands steady now. I'm going to finish what Robert started. Vanessa wants to play dirty? Fine, but this time she's picked the wrong target. The pieces were in place. Tomorrow, Vanessa would learn that some traditions deserve to be broken. You need to see this, my mother said, pulling a dusty photo album from her attic storage. I knew I recognized Vanessa from somewhere. We sat on her living room floor, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across old photographs. One particular image made me gasp. Vanessa, 20 years younger, standing next to my mother at a real estate conference. She worked at River Valley Properties, Remy explained, her voice tight. Until they fired her for fraudulent dealings, she was using elderly clients' signatures to transfer property titles. My phone lit up with another text from Colby. Mom's crying. How could you do this to her? I switched it off. There's more, Remy continued, flipping pages. She married Robert 6 months after meeting him at that same conference. His first wife had just died in a car accident. Wait, I sat up straighter. I thought Robert was divorced from his first wife. That's what Vanessa tells everyone. A new voice made us both jump. An older woman stood in the doorway. Felicity had brought someone with her. This is Haley, Felicity introduced. Vanessa's sister. Haley's hands trembled as she sat down. I've spent years trying to expose what my sister did to Margaret, Robert's first wife. The car accident. It wasn't an accident. What are you saying? I whispered, though I already knew. The brake lines were cut. They couldn't prove anything, but Margaret had just discovered some discrepancies in Robert's accounts. She was going to confront Vanessa that day. My mother grabbed my hand. Summer. I have proof, Haley continued, pulling out an old envelope. Margaret sent me copies of everything she found. I was too scared to come forward then, but when I saw the news about your wedding, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Ben and Johnny. The injunction's filed, Ben announced, but Vanessa's already countering with her own legal team. Johnny examined Haley's documents. This changes everything, these banking records combined with what Robert left. We can do more than just stop her from taking the house. We can put her in jail, Haley finished, her voice breaking. Margaret deserves justice. My phone started ringing. Colby had switched to calling now. I finally answered, putting it on speaker. Summer, please. His voice cracked. Mom says she'll drop everything if you just apologize. We can work this out. I looked at the faces around me, my mother's determination, Haley's pain, Felicity's concern, Ben's and Johnny's resolve. No, Colby, we can't. Your mother needs to face what she's done. All of it. What are you talking about? Come to my mother's house. There's something you need to see about Margaret. The line went silent for a moment. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up, my heart heavy, but my purpose clear. It was time for the truth to come out, all of it. Colby sat motionless on my mother's couch, staring at the documents spread before him. His face had gone from red to white to slightly green as Haley explained everything. Dad knew? His voice cracked. All this time? That's why he left the evidence for Summer, Ben explained gently. He knew Vanessa would try this again. The front door burst open. Vanessa stormed in, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. What is this emergency meeting about my daughter in... She froze when she saw Haley. Hello, sister, Haley said quietly. What are you doing here? Vanessa's perfectly maintained composure cracked. Colby, we're leaving. No, Mom. Colby stood up, holding Margaret's old banking records. We're not. What did you do? Whatever she's told you, they're lies, Vanessa spat. Haley's always been jealous of my success, my family. Success? I stepped forward. You mean like your success at River Valley Properties? Before they fired you for fraud? Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You little... Or maybe your success with Margaret's brake lines. Haley's voice shook. I kept quiet for 20 years, not anymore. You have no proof, Vanessa hissed, but her eyes darted to the papers on the table. Johnny cleared his throat. Actually, we do. Robert kept everything. The police are very interested in reopening Margaret's case. The color drained from Vanessa's face. She turned to Colby, reaching for him. Darling, you can't believe these lies. I'm your mother. Stop. Colby's voice was ice. Just stop. Did you kill her? Of course not. I loved Robert. Everything I did was for our family. Like emptying his bank accounts? I picked up the statements. Or forging that family tradition document. You ungrateful little witch. Vanessa lunged for the papers, but Ben stepped between us. Mrs. Davidson, Johnny announced formally, I'm serving you with both an injunction regarding the estate and a court order to cooperate with the reopened investigation into Margaret's death. Vanessa snatched the papers, her hands shaking. This isn't over. Colby, tell them. Tell them I'm a good mother. But Colby had sunk back onto the couch, his head in his hands. Get out, Mom. Just get out. Fine. She straightened her spine, smoothing her designer dress. But remember who was there for you all these years, not some gold digger you barely know. She stormed out, slamming the door. The room fell silent except for Colby's ragged breathing. I'm so sorry, Haley whispered. I should have spoken up sooner. I reached for Colby's hand, but he pulled away. I need time, he mumbled, standing up. I can't. He walked out without another word, leaving me wondering if saving our home was worth destroying his world. The courthouse steps felt endless as I climbed them a week later. Johnny walked beside me, briefcase full of evidence, while Ben and Felicity flanked me like guards. Vanessa's lawyer requested a private meeting, Johnny said, checking his watch. They're waiting in the conference room. She's going to try to manipulate her way out of this, Felicity warned. Let her try. I squared my shoulders and pushed open the heavy wooden door. Vanessa sat at the conference table, looking immaculate as always. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, sat beside her. But what made my heart stop was seeing Colby on Vanessa's other side. Summer, he said quietly, not quite meeting my eyes. Before we begin, Vanessa's lawyer started, my client would like to offer a settlement. Johnny raised an eyebrow. We're listening. Full ownership of the house remains with Mrs. Davidson, the lawyer continued, but she's willing to offer a generous monthly stipend to the young couple, provided all other matters are dropped. You mean the murder investigation? Ben's voice was sharp. Those are unfounded allegations, the lawyer replied smoothly, and pursuing them would only hurt everyone involved. Think about your marriage, dear. I looked at Colby, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. Did you know about this offer? Mom says we can live in the guest house, he mumbled. It's a good compromise. A compromise? I laughed incredulously. Your mother killed your father's first wife, drained his accounts, and tried to steal our home. And you want to compromise? Summer, please. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet. Let's be reasonable. Family should stick together. Family? Haley's voice came from the doorway. She walked in, followed by 2 police detectives. Like you stuck by Margaret? Vanessa's composure cracked. What are they doing here? We've been reviewing the evidence, one detective said, including new testimony from your former mechanic. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Her lawyer whispered something urgently in her ear. Colby, I said softly, I love you, but I won't let her win. Not this time. He finally looked at me, tears in his eyes. She's my mother, and Margaret was someone's wife, someone's daughter. I turned to Johnny. Show them everything. Johnny opened his briefcase, laying out document after document. Bank statements, police reports, Robert's letters, the mechanic's sworn statement. We'll see you in court, Johnny said firmly. All of it, the fraud, the forgery, and Margaret's death. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. Colby, come. But Colby didn't move. He stared at Margaret's old photo on the table, his hands trembling. Colby, Vanessa snapped. No, Mom, he whispered. I'm staying. The look Vanessa gave me could have frozen hell. You'll regret this, she hissed, before storming out. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The courtroom fell silent as Vanessa took the stand. She'd worn pale blue, playing the part of the innocent mother perfectly. But her hands shook as she adjusted the microphone. Mrs. Davidson, her lawyer began, could you explain the family tradition regarding the estate? Of course, Vanessa smiled warmly at the judge. It's been passed down through generations. The matriarch protects the family legacy. Johnny stood up. Your Honor, may I approach? He carried Robert's original will to the judge, along with the forensics report on Vanessa's traditional document. Mrs. Davidson, Johnny turned to her, can you explain why your traditional document was printed on paper manufactured in 2018? Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Vanessa's smile faltered. I had to recreate it. The original was lost. Like the brake inspection records from Margaret's car were lost? Objection! Vanessa's lawyer shot up. Withdrawn, Johnny said smoothly. Let's discuss the bank transfers instead. For the next hour, Johnny methodically dismantled every lie. Bank statements showed systematic theft. The forged document crumbled under expert testimony. Then came the mechanic. She paid me to keep quiet, he testified, avoiding Vanessa's glare. Said the brake lines needed to be adjusted for Mrs. Margaret's safety. Colby, sitting behind me, made a choked sound. Vanessa's composure finally broke. Everything I did was for my family. That woman was going to ruin everything, just like this one. She pointed at me, face contorted. These gold diggers trying to steal what belongs to me. Mrs. Davidson, the judge's voice cut through her outburst. Control yourself. I built this family, Vanessa screamed. I protected it. Margaret would have destroyed everything. She had to be stopped. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel as the detectives moved forward. Vanessa's lawyer slumped in her chair. I think we've heard enough, the judge declared. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Furthermore, I'm ordering Mrs. Davidson be taken into custody pending criminal charges. As the detectives approached with handcuffs, Vanessa turned to Colby. Baby, please, tell them I'm a good mother. Tell them. But Colby was crying silently, his face buried in his hands. I reached back and took his hand. This time, he held on tight. Vanessa Davidson, one detective began. You're under arrest for the murder of Margaret Wilson. They led her away, still screaming about family and tradition. The judge awarded us full ownership of the house and ordered Vanessa to repay everything she'd stolen. It's over, Felicity whispered, hugging me. But looking at Colby's tears, I knew it wasn't. We'd won the case, but the real work, healing our marriage and helping Colby cope with his mother's true nature, was just beginning. Sometimes justice comes at a heavy price. The morning sun streamed through our kitchen windows as I poured 2 cups of coffee. Colby sat at the counter, reading the newspaper headline about Vanessa's sentencing. 20 years, he said quietly, pushing the paper away. It still doesn't feel real. I slid his coffee across the counter. How are you holding up? Better, I think. The therapy's helping. He managed a small smile. Thank you for suggesting it. And for not giving up on us, I ventured. He reached across the counter and took my hand. I'm the one who should be thanking you for that. I almost chose the wrong side. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Haley standing on our porch, holding a box. I found these while cleaning out Vanessa's house, she said when we let her in. They belong here. Inside the box were photo albums, pictures of Robert with Margaret, their wedding photos, holiday celebrations, hidden away by Vanessa all these years. Dad looks so happy here, Colby said softly, touching a photo of Robert and Margaret at a beach. I barely remember him smiling like that. Margaret's family called, Haley told us. They want to meet you, Colby, when you're ready. He nodded, wiping his eyes. I'd like that. My phone buzzed, a text from Ben. Police found more evidence in Vanessa's storage unit. 3 more fraud cases. They're adding charges. We should plant that garden Margaret wanted, Colby said suddenly, looking out at our backyard. Dad's letters mentioned how she'd planned everything, the flowers, the vegetables. I'd love that, I smiled. It's time this place felt like a real home again. The front door opened as my mother and Felicity arrived with paint samples. We'd decided to refresh every room, erasing the last traces of Vanessa's influence. No more beige, Felicity declared, spreading out bright, cheerful colors. As everyone gathered around the kitchen counter, discussing paint colors and garden plans, I watched Colby. He was laughing at something Haley said, the haunted look finally fading from his eyes. Hey, he caught me watching and pulled me close. Thank you for fighting for the truth, for fighting for us. Even though it hurt? Because it hurt, he corrected. You saw the rot and didn't let it spread, even when I was too scared to look. Through the window, I could see the spot where we'd plant Margaret's garden. The house felt different now, lighter, cleaner, free of secrets and lies. Ready to pick some colors? I asked Colby. He smiled, a real full smile that reached his eyes. Ready to start fresh. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rebuilding something stronger from the ruins they left behind.